Pay close attention to Libby Squire. She's 21 years old, alone, and trying to get home. She doesn't know that for nearly 2 hours, cameras across this city are recording her every step. A bus camera, a street camera, passing cars, again and again. What Libby doesn't know is that Pavel Relowich is already nearby. A man police would later identify through CCTV, DNA, and one moment no camera could see. Libby Squire is still alive in this footage, but she has no idea how close she is to the last frame of her life. Libby Squire was not reckless. She was not running from anyone. She was not looking for trouble. She was simply trying to get home. At 21 years old, Libby was a philosophy student at the University of Hull. She had moved to the city to study, to think, to plan a future that, by all accounts, was just beginning. Friends described her as gentle, intelligent, and thoughtful, someone who asked questions most people never stopped to ask. Nothing in her past suggested that the night of January 31st would be her last January 31st. 2019 started like any other Thursday. Libby spent the evening drinking with friends. Bars were busy. Music was loud. The night carried no sense of danger. Inside these venues, cameras recorded her laughing, talking, moving freely. She was alive. She was visible. She was surrounded by people. But as the hours passed, alcohol changed the balance of the night. By the early morning, Libby was intoxicated, not unconscious, not panicked, just vulnerable. At around 2 o'clock in the morning, friends last saw her. After that moment, no one she trusted was with her anymore. At approximately 2:25 a.m., Libby boarded a bus. She sits alone. Her movements are slow, her posture unsteady. She leans forward, then back. This footage would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case, because this bus did not take Libby home. She exited near Beverly Road, several miles away from where she lived. Why she chose to get off there is still unclear. What is clear is this: from that moment on, Libby was completely alone in the city. Hull is not a city people associate with constant surveillance, but it is watched. Traffic cameras, public street cameras, private business systems. As Libby began walking, she unknowingly passed through all of them. She stops, she turns, she leans against walls. Investigators would later describe her movements as disoriented, not panicked, not chased, just a young woman trying to find her way. For nearly 2 hours, cameras across Hull followed her route. Not continuously, not clearly, but enough to reconstruct her final journey step by step. When detectives first reviewed the footage, nothing immediately screamed danger. Libby was alone, but no one was visibly attacking her. No struggle, no obvious confrontation. Then they noticed something unusual. A car. It appears briefly on one camera. Minutes later, it appears again, on a different street. Then again, not speeding, not stopping. Just present one appearance could be coincidence. 3, 4, 5 appearances. That becomes a pattern. Police began mapping Libby's movements minute by minute. Every timestamp, every camera angle. The footage showed her moving toward Oak Road playing fields, a darker, quieter area of the city. This was not on her direct route home, and more importantly, there were no cameras beyond this point. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Libby is seen on CCTV for the final time. She walks forward. No one else is visible. She does not look back. This frame would later be described as the last confirmed image of Libby Squire alive. After this moment, there is nothing. No more footage, no witnesses, no phone activity. The city that had watched Libby for hours suddenly went blind. This gap, this missing stretch of time, would become the center of the investigation. Because whatever happened to Libby happened where no camera could record it. When Libby did not return home, concern escalated quickly. Calls went unanswered, messages unread. Her family contacted police. Search teams were deployed. Rivers were scanned. Fields were searched. The city retraced her steps again and again. Days passed. Then weeks, on March 20th, 2019, nearly 7 weeks after Libby disappeared, her body was discovered in the Humber estuary. The investigation changed instantly. This was no longer a search. This was a homicide inquiry. Investigators had hours of CCTV, a repeated vehicle, a detailed timeline. But they still didn't know how Libby entered the water, who she was with, what happened in the unseen gap. The answer would not come from cameras alone. It would come from DNA and from the car that kept appearing again and again. The breakthrough did not come from a confession. It did not come from a witness. It came from something far quieter, a car. When detectives reviewed the CCTV again, they stopped looking at Libby. They started looking around her. Every camera, every street corner, every passing vehicle. That's when the pattern became impossible to ignore. A small green car appeared near Libby's route, then appeared again, then again. Not racing, not stopping, just circling. Investigators counted how many times it passed near her. It wasn't coincidence, it was proximity. Police began isolating frames where the car was clearest. Headlights, reflections, number plate angles. It wasn't perfect footage, but it was enough. The vehicle was traced to a man living in Hull. His name was Pavel Relowich. At first, he didn't stand out. He had no connection to Libby, no criminal history for violent offenses, no reason, on paper, to be involved. Which is why he wasn't arrested. Immediate. When police first spoke to Pavel Relowich, he was calm. He acknowledged being out that night. He acknowledged driving around the city. But he denied knowing Libby, denied seeing her, denied picking anyone up. At that moment, police had no proof he was lying, no eyewitness, no camera capturing the crime, no confession, only suspicion. The turning point didn't come from CCTV. It came from Libby's body. When forensic teams examined her clothing, they recovered trace evidence. DNA. Not enough to identify a stranger at random, but enough to compare. When police took a sample from Pavel Relowich, it matched. Faced with the DNA results, Pavel changed his story. He now admitted he had encountered Libby, admitted she had been in his car, but he insisted it was consensual, that nothing violent happened, that he had dropped her off safely. There was just one problem. CCTV showed his car leaving the area alone, and Libby was never seen again. Investigators now understood the gap, why cameras followed Libby, and then suddenly stopped. The crime didn't happen on camera. It happened in the space between them, the moment Libby entered the car. That was the frame no camera could record. Police reconstructed the timeline using CCTV, phone data vehicle movements, forensic evidence. The conclusion was unavoidable. Libby was abducted, assaulted, and killed. Her body was later disposed of in the Humber estuary, not impulsively, deliberately. With DNA confirmed and contradictions mounting, Pavel Relowich was arrested. This time, the interview room felt different. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. It was physical, scientific, unavoidable. In court, prosecutors laid out the timeline, the cameras, the car, the DNA, the silence after 3:30 a.m. The defense argued consent. The jury saw the footage, and they saw the gap. In February 2021, Pavel Relowich was found guilty of rape-murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court concluded what the cameras alone could not. Libby Squire did not disappear. She was taken. By the time the trial began, the footage was no longer just surveillance. It was a story. A story the jury would have to follow frame by frame, step by step. Prosecutors did not begin with emotion. They began with time. They laid out a timeline built entirely from cameras where Libby was seen, when she was seen, and when she was not. The jury watched CCTV clips showing her movements across Hull. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. Every appearance placed her closer to the same car and further from safety. One of the most important moments in the trial did not involve video, it involved absence. The prosecution explained that surveillance is powerful but incomplete. Cameras watch streets, they do not watch interiors. They showed the jury exactly where the cameras stopped, exactly where Libby disappeared from view, and exactly why that mattered. Because the crime happened off camera, not by accident but by design. The defense did not deny contact, they argued consent. They claimed Libby willingly entered the car, that nothing violent occurred, that the encounter ended peacefully, but the CCTV told a different story, the car left alone. Libby was never seen again, and DNA placed her inside the vehicle. The jury was left with a single question. If she was dropped off safely, where did she? Jurors later described the footage as unsettling, not because it showed violence, but because it showed normality. A woman walking, cars passing, a city asleep, and then nothing. The CCTV didn't show what happened, but it showed enough to make every alternative explanation collapse. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on both counts. Rape. Murder. The courtroom fell silent, not with shock but with finality. The judge described the crime as opportunistic and predatory. A decision made in minutes with consequences that would last forever. A life sentence was imposed, with a minimum term that ensured Pavel Relowich would spend decades behind bars. For Libby's family, the verdict did not bring closure. It brought answers. Answers built not from witnesses, but from cameras, from timestamps, from the space between frames. This case exposed something unsettling. CCTV can follow you for miles, it can record your presence, it can reconstruct your path, but it cannot protect you, and it cannot see everything. Libby Squire's final night was documented by dozens of cameras, yet the most important moment was never recorded. That missing frame became the truth police couldn't ignore, and the reminder no city wants to hear being seen is not the same as being safe. The verdict closed the case, but it didn't end the conversation. As soon as the guilty verdict was announced, headlines spread fast. National news, international coverage. Social media timelines filled with Libby's face. The footage was replayed again and again, not because it showed violence, but because it showed how ordinary the night looked. People asked the same question. How could this happen on streets covered in cameras? Parents questioned safety. Students questioned. Late-night travel cities questioned their reliance on surveillance because CCTV had followed Libby for hours and still failed to stop what came next. Investigators admitted something important. Cameras are tools, not protection. They can trace movements, and they showed enough to remove doubt because this wasn't chaos, it was opportunity. A quiet city, a vulnerable moment, a man circling, until there were no cameras left. CCTV does not stop crimes. It explains them, it tells the story after it's too late. And sometimes it tells the story by what it doesn't show. Libby Squire was not reckless. She was seen, she was tracked, she was recorded, but she was taken in the space between frames. This was the night CCTV watched her live, and the moment it could not save her. This video is a documentary-style analysis created for educational purposes under fair use.